my husband said, "You're pretty high energy. I better keep you busy." And I'd always talked about how I loved art. So long story short, I hit my mom, my mother-in-law, Dulcie Scoggin was his mom, Paul's mom, was a wonderful artist. And so one year they went out and bought me a whole setup. I had long gotten rid of my supplies and all art, watercolors, the table, the paints, the brushes, everything. So I started taking workshops up at Art in the Mountains. We were living in Oregon at the time. And I was very lucky to take from some wonderful people. And so that was kind of my vacation every summer until I retired. And then I started, after I retired, I got, much more involved. So, and I have to say that like everybody else, you kind of want to start and do things realistic and the best image of what you're looking at and so forth. But I had a wonderful teacher in Portland. Her name was Chris Keylock Williams. And even though she painted real subjects, she had a way of abstracting them that was very, very interesting. And she always had phenomenal shapes in her paintings. And she taught at the little gallery that was like 2 blocks down from where I lived. So I was really lucky to take quite a few series of classes from her. So anyway, then I got down here and I did a lot of plein air, both in Oregon and when I came to California, which, plein air has its own set of issues. And you'll see a plein air painting today of mine that I'm going to work on. And, you see all of that, the big world around you, and you think, oh, what am I going to do? And so one of the things I started doing was thinking about reducing things to simple shapes, simplifying. And then as I started looking at, I was very intrigued by abstracts. And I took a class from Gwen Fox. She was I always say she got me started in abstract. She lives in, it's Taos. I can't remember if it's Taos or Santa Fe, but it's one of those spots. And she was very, very good. And so she really got me started. And I really learned to think about shapes instead of things. And even if you're a realistic painter, which I think are wonderful, and I love looking at fabulous realistic paintings, but sometimes if the composition isn't right, you still have to add in shapes that aren't really there. You're still going to convey the message of what the subject matter is, but you do need to add some shapes sometimes to make the overall composition really good. So that's a little bit of how I came to where I am, and when I started, I just loved it, and I've kind of been on that path. And so I like to do them both in watercolor and in acrylics and mixed media. So that's where I'm going. The way I look at it is to plan pretty well. I took from Ron Ransom. He says, plan like a tortoise and paint like a hare. And I like to do some planning about what I'm going to do. And then when I get into it, I just paint with abandon and let it go. I've already had a little thinking about what my plan was. But if the painting goes a different direction, I don't really care. And then once you get all that energy and the spontaneousness and letting, particularly watercolor, do the things that it does, which are so wonderful. And you have to be loose and fast to let that happen. Then I sort of slow down, and then I start thinking more about the principles and elements of design and bringing the painting back together. And that's what we're going to look at today a little bit. Today, when I talked with Ralph about what he wanted me to do, I had a series of subjects that I teach. I call them my individual lessons. So he chose 3, so this is going to be jam-packed. I'm not going to talk too much longer here. But today, my main job today is to give you tools. And I'm going to give you a bunch of tools. So if you want to take notes, and I know you have recording of this that you can go back to, so that's good. Because I'm going to cram a lot in, and I'm going to go fairly rapidly. So I advise you to just take a few little notes. But what we're going to talk about, the 3 main things, is developing a center of interest, which was always one of my weak points when I was painting. Anytime a teacher critiqued, they would always say, Kathleen, where's your center of interest? So I've had to really think about that a lot. And just recently, I've been working on that a lot also. So we're going to talk about developing a center of interest. We're going to talk about glazing and how that can be real helpful in any stage of painting. And then the last thing that I'm going to kind of finish up with is fixing a painting, which I will use all of the things I talked about in the first two topics to go ahead and fix a painting that has some problems. So how I'm going to handle it today is I'm going to do a series of what I call mini demos. And I'm not going to do a painting from start to finish today. So I hope that isn't going to be a disappointment for you. You're going to see several pieces of my awful work that needs fixing. And you're going to see me do some things to change some things. You're going to see me just with some starts and bring on some things. So you're going to see paintings at different stages. So I hope that'll be, helpful for you. The other thing that I really love for you to do, and I don't know how Ralph handles this, but I love it when you ask questions when I'm demoing. That's the best time if you see something that either, you need me to clarify, or I'm not making sense, or you can't see, or whatever it is, or even if you have a question about something unrelated to what I'm doing, that's okay, as long as it's art. I guess I could give you a recipe, but that's probably not what we want to do today. Anyway, I'm really happy to do that. It doesn't bother me, doesn't interrupt my flow or anything. And I think sometimes if I'm not making sense and people have questions, I'm sure somebody else has the same question. So it's just, I really encourage you to ask questions during painting, during my demo time. So does anybody make questions now about what we're going to do today? So if not, then I'm going to move out. I'm going to mute myself. This computer's just going to sit here. And I'm going to move out to the studio, which will take me about a 30-second walk. So see you shortly.
Let's see, where's the other part here? Paul's.
Good morning, Ralph.
Hello there, who's that?
Who's that?
Katie saying hello.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Okay, I'm back. Can everybody see my hands?
Bye.
Yep.
Okay, good. I do want to apologize. Today is not only garbage day, but lawn care and gardening day. Hopefully they're all done with their blowers and their mowers. And I think the garbage has already come. So I do apologize. So, okay, let's get started. Before I get painting, what I'm going to do is show you my palettes. And I have two palettes just because I can't do one. I'm not one of these people that paints with 3 colors. I know I should, and it's kind of classic, but I just love color too much.
Yes.
This is my original palette, which I call my transparent palette. They're not all transparent, there's yellow ochre in there. But this is a palette I got started with. It's the one I used in Oregon. And one of my friends down here, I spend time in the desert in the winter, and she said, "Oh, you're not from around here, are you?" And I said, "Well, not originally, no." And she's, "I can tell by your palette. That's not a desert palette." So that's most of my other ones. Then when I got into doing, I use a lot of opaques. And this is my opaque palette. And you notice the other one was clean and this one's not because I just mix up stuff on it. So these are mostly all American Journey colors. And I didn't send out my supply list and the names, but I'm happy to share that. If any of you want that, I can just send it to Ralph and you can remind him it later, and I'll just send him anything that you guys want.
For
So
those,
I'm happy,
for those
happy
who
to
don't
share.
know, American Journey is Cheap Joe's brand.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. Okay. What did I do with my brushes? Okay, there, okay. So today, the first thing I want to talk about is the center of interest. And I think, once again, well, 2 things that I want to say that are really important. I always in front of, on every, where I paint, I have the 8 principles of design and the 7 elements of design. And I continuously go back to those. That's where my more scientific type, more objective rather than subjective thinking comes. They're kind of rules, but they're great guidelines, and they're very helpful in when you're trying to see what's wrong with a painting, to go over and look at the principles. Is it balanced? Does it have harmony? Is there repetition? Is there dominance? All these kinds of things that will help you identify that what's maybe wrong with your painting. We'll talk about that more when we get to that point. But, and I can also share those too. So But first of all, we're going to talk about shapes, which is one of the main elements. And that's really, no matter what you paint, abstract or realistic or anywhere in between, all you're dealing with is shapes. And Ed Whitney, he's long gone now, but who was, to me, I studied a lot of the people that took from him. He said, we are shape makers and entertainers. And so I always think about shapes. So in my little quest to do better center of interest, I have developed, I'm approaching it several different ways. I'm going to tell you all the different ways that you can find shapes for the center of interest. One thing I do, I've started a sketchbook with nothing but shapes. And I just do a variety of shapes. I can copy them out of a magazine. I can copy somebody else's painting. I can see there's a more organic shape. There's tree shapes. Let's see, I think I've got one over here. There's another kind of a organic shape. But see, there's shapes within that. I could take any one of those and start developing those shapes in a center of interest. And usually you'll have smaller shapes in a center of interest. This one's kind of now this is a whole piece, but this is numbers and letters, and you just start overlapping them. But if you took just a piece of this, there's some interesting little shapes for a center of interest. So you can find these anywhere. So that's one thing. So if I get stuck, I go to my book and I have some resources there, and that inspires me. These Zen Doodle books or Zen Tangle books, all kinds of shapes in here, and they're wonderful. Some of them I would use, some of them I wouldn't, but any of those kinds of little patterns you could start doing in a center of interest or superimposing even on a realistic, and I'll show you that later. So there is a world of places you can find shapes.
Yeah, I don't really know why I have the highlights on that rock, because that was the last a couple weeks ago, but I agree they don't really belong there, so I have to darken them, but I appreciate your feedback on it.
Ralph,
You need to
please
mute yourself.
mute
You're talking.
everybody.
Oh, I didn't know if that was a question or a comment. So, okay. So the other ways that, let's say you get to a painting and you're ready to do center of interest, okay? And we all have these. Here's a grid. These I get at the dollar store. They put them in your sink to, so that you don't, break your dishes when you put it in there. And so let me get a little bit of paint here. Let's see, let's get some color. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through how you can do it. I'm going to demonstrate this. I just did a painting or a piece of paper with different colors on it. So you can kind of see how you can do these things. And but I'm just going to give quick demos. And now, when you're doing this, be sure you use multiple colors. Don't always just use one color when you do a stencil or a grid. And don't always go like around the whole thing. Make it uneven so that you can, I'm going to put a little bit of opaque in here and just show you how the opaque kind of changes the. And then when you pick it up, you can see on that piece of paper right now, of this, you look right there where those dots are. And so you could see if you added that to any painting. Now it looks like, oh, I did a grid. So I have a little damp tape paper towel here, and come in and make it look so it doesn't look like you used a stencil or a grid. Because nothing's worse than when you get to a painting and say, oh, I know I have that exact stencil they use. So you can see now I've kind of smeared that. And it's kind of different. You have different colors, different values. But boy, if this were your painting, let's say you had a painting this size, you'd know exactly where I wanted you to look, wouldn't you? Okay. So these are little L's. You make them out of Bristol board or the back of old watercolor paper. And they're really handy for finding scenes or shapes within shapes. Let me use this one here. Here's a stencil, same idea. There's some neutral I put down. So I'm going to, you can put stencils on with many ways. I kind of like the stencil, but my favorite is spraying with an atomizer, but I don't use it too much because it's, I mean, I use it a lot myself. I don't use it in classes. It's kind of hard for people to use. I should give a lesson just on atomizers. So I'm making a light opaque over both some transparent and some opaque paint. So you can see what a difference that makes. And once again, come in a little bit and soften some of these edges so it doesn't look like, oh, she used a stencil. You can even soften in there, so but you can see that you certainly would, if that was a painting, you would certainly look there, even though the brightest color is here, because you have smaller shapes and you have a pattern. Color and texture are two very, very strong elements of design. And so when you're thinking about a highly textured painting and a highly colored painting, you need to figure out which is dominant, because they both want to be divas, and they both are very strong elements. So you need to think about that. Okay, another one, which is always interesting, is collage. And I love making collage papers. And I prefer making them in with acrylic, because they stay. And I'm going to show you a ruined painting today that I messed up. Tear your edges so it doesn't look like you. I make all my own collage papers. I don't like using things out of books and magazines. When you put when you use watercolor, you have to be careful that it will run when you get it wet with the glue. And I'm also going to show you what I do. But so you can see right away how that really, and yet what some of the paint from below shines through, which always makes it nice. So you can see right away. Oh, the other thing to do when you collage is don't just stick it on and leave a piece of paper. Come in with a little paint. And now I think this was a watercolor piece of collage, so I have to be very careful that I don't smear that. And you can, once this is dry, you can go over it with a glaze. But see, when I come in and make a little bit of, it almost goes away. And when that dries, so you can see how it doesn't look like a piece of paper stuck on a page. So you can kind of, oops.
I can't make my
What, John?
earphones work.
So you see how I'm kind of going over the edge. Now there's the black running. But, you know, maybe that's okay. So you can see I did that a little square. I should cut that in a little more, torn that in a little more irregular. But once again, you can see you're going to look there if you have that in a painting. Okay? So that's yet another. And these I make in my palette. When I'm done painting, I take a chopstick or something and make sure, let's say I have some paint left over and I don't want, you know, I'm not going to use it again. And I go like this and make some designs, and I might even use a credit card. This is kind of a fun thing to do. Never waste any paint. They're all too expensive. And then I'll be right back. Hang on. And I use a piece of deli paper or tissue. And I just make a little print. And there I have a little piece of collage paper. So that's how I get a lot of these. And sometimes I use stencils. I use whatever I have. Okay, let's see. Another thing that is that will really make a difference is some splatter or spray. And I love doing a light on top of a dark. If you're just needing to bring there's some dark area down here. Something really simple like that may just be all you need. Everybody see everything on this page so far? This is my little sample page to show you all the difference. That's what's going on here. Probably will never be a painting, although you never know, it might sometime. You never know. And then you can always go like this too, to make more lines. That's great, like florals. I love that because it gives a feeling of excitement. And also you can kind of lead where you want the person to look. If you can get it right and have it spray in the right direction. And, oh, another thing you can do, if you're, I'm going to use a Sharpie just because so you can see it really well. If you just don't have any of these things that I've talked about, you just look someplace in the room, and no matter where you are, and you just do a contour drawing without looking at your page, and you just start doing, I'm out in the studio, so I see I'm looking at some brushes, and then there's a faucet and a sink beside it, and there's a line, and I come down. Well, look, all of a sudden now I have shapes. And they're, if I just tried to draw those shapes, I couldn't do it. But without looking and just looking at something to give me some ideas, and then you can kind of close them up. And you've got a center of interest, and you can add some pattern in there. Some shapes within shapes. And all of a sudden now you have something to look at. It's that simple. So, and the other thing they say to do sometimes is draw with your non-dominant hand. Just don't even think about it, just do it. And you always get these weird shapes. So here's another way you can come up with shapes that you might not have. And sometimes that's all you need in is an area. And we're going to talk about color when I move on to my next things. The main thing that you want in a painting, though, is to be sure that all your shapes and all your lines lead to the center of interest. Okay, so we're going to get rid of this for now. And see, I do kind of realistic paintings. There's a floral, and it's a ho-hum painting. And here's another thing, and I'm going to show you how I love to add. This to me is a very organic painting. It's an organic subject matter. There's all curved lines, there's soft edges. There's nothing geometric about this. And I've decided that different people like to paint different ways. And I paint 99% very organic. On my paintings, you'll see very curved edges and curved shapes. And I try to paint very geometric or straight shapes. And it's very difficult for me because I think some geometric paintings are very beautiful sometimes. So one way we can do a couple of things on here just to add some interest. I have a little splatter, but I think it needs a little more. So what I'm going to do is put a very light. Now here's one. This is just packing material, that styrofoam packing material. I'm going to put a little variation so I don't have the same color. I have the same color, but I have different little values on this. Let's see what happens. You never know on these. Someday. Okay, where do I want you to look? This is sort of the biggest shape. It's the lightest light against the darkest dark. We'll talk about value also. That's another important way to make you look. But it really doesn't stand out. But let's see what happens when we do this. Okay, now that I like to make a checkerboard with this stuff. As weird as that may seem. I gotta make sure I got that right this way. And then come in with our damp towel so it doesn't look, but you can see already, you look there. It's subtle, but you look there. And I always like to do it, if you do something one place, whether it's a color, a texture, or a shape, be sure that you repeat it someplace else in the painting. I'm just gonna do just a little bit down here, just so you have it. There's a little continuity between the two, so your eye travels. So that's, you can use those. Now, if I'd used darker colors, it would have shown up more. That's a little bit of a delicate painting, so I didn't want to do too much. You can use things like, this comes from the dollar store. It's the stuff you line your shelves with. So let's just put a little bit more. I'm just going to show you, I'm probably going to overdo it on this, but you can see how adding some of this stuff, you know, I'm going to do a little blue, I think, because I could use a little, I've got a little blue in here. Normally, I would not use two different designs like this, but I just want to show you the effect. It's way too wet.
Kathleen, that's acrylic, right?
No, this is all watercolor. It's all I'm using today is watercolor. The one thing I would, now I do make watercolor designs. You know, I showed you those little collage pieces. And the trouble with watercolor, you got to be really careful because they will, they'll run when you get them wet, either with the glue or when I went over it with a little color. So you can see how that adds a little interest to that painting. Grids like this work really well too. This is, I get this at Joann's. I don't shop at Joann's anymore, but I guess you could order. It's their rug cooking stuff. So let's just, for fun, do this. I mean, I'm overdoing it, but I want to show you how different things, I'll put a different color in here. So I've got some green. Let's do a little green. Notice I'm going in kind of an irregular direction. I love grids on organic paintings. I think that's my favorite. So you can see really right in there how interesting that makes that look and how it's a change of pace from the rest of it. Now, I've used 3 different things. I do not recommend that. See, I like that piece. See how it changes the whole dynamic of that? And it's, you wouldn't think of it, but it's a good way to make your paintings a little more interesting and have them a little different from everybody else's. So those just, I hate to admit this, but you know I'm a bit of a trickster. That's really all I'm doing is teaching you tricks. Okay, so that's one way how you can change a painting. Sometimes a painting that's a little ho-hum, that's all you have to do is just come in and, oh, I've got a few more things.
Or tricks up your sleeve, eh?
Tricks, yeah, that's all you need is a book of tricks and simple things. Here's toilet paper rolls. I mean, anything works. Look at that. And then what's fun, you can kind of squeeze them into oblongs. And then what you can do is come in and do all kinds of if you wanted to come in and do, you know, little designs or something, or little cross hatches, you've created yourself some shapes. And all of a sudden now you look there. Notice I used 2 different, a red and a white. So you kind of, so it kind of changes out. And then of course, if you don't like all the circles, you can break them up a little bit. Kind of stayed on there. But that's really fun. That really makes a fun thing. And they're different sizes. And sometimes you don't get it evenly on here, so it makes a half a circle, which is even more interesting. So a little trick, well, I'll show you. This is just plain chalk, like the kids use, chalkboards in school and so forth. Especially if you have dark on your painting and you want to draw and you don't want to put, you want to see what the design looks like, draw it in chalk first, because then you can see it. Now, it doesn't show up as much on the light, but you could use a pencil. But I love chalk. And then if you, okay, I like that shape, or I don't like that shape. So all you have to do, the beauty of it, it comes right off with a little water. So it's not there permanently. So you can get your shape in, you can do what you want, and then the chalk will come right off. So it's not a part of the permanent painting, okay? So that's just another little thing, because sometimes you get these big starts, and then, oh, what do I do? And I want to draw some shapes in. Chalk is a great little tool to use for that. And then one more thing, these again come from the dollar store, and they are, they're pot holders. And so anything goes. Always put a couple colors on your little stamp that you're going to use. Those are dark, so let's do that one up here. This one happens to be kind of a honeycomb, but isn't that interesting? So you can see already just on this page, be sure to smear a little bit around the edges. Notice it was I put it on kind of unevenly. So you don't want it to look, oh, they used the pot holder on that one, So, so there are some ideas for getting shapes and texture and interest in a center of interest. Okay. I wanted to show you this painting. This is an example of a painting that was, I got, the shapes, I've got some darks and lights and so forth, but there wasn't anything going on here. So I used two different stencils on it. And one was a letter stencil, big letters or numbers. Maybe those were numbers, I can't remember. And then I had another, I think it's the same one I used with you today, kind of geometric. This is pretty organic shapes and everything. And I sprayed, so it had a little different effect. And I softened edges so it didn't show. And I did them one on top of each other. Then I also did it another place. If you did not have this, which is kind of, well, I used the same stencil, so it definitely is a repetition. If I did not have that, this would be totally isolated. And for me, when I added it in another place, notice I had it pointing towards my center of interest. Your job as an artist is to, getting dry here. Your job as an artist, number one, is to create an interesting painting. And that means that you want the viewer to walk into a room, see it across the room and say, oh, I love that, walk up to it. And then when they get up and look at it closer, you want them to stay in your painting and keep moving around the painting. And part of that is having line and texture and shapes point in and around the painting and keep you coming in. That line is coming in. That's a pretty strong shape coming in there. That shape almost looks like a point on it is coming in there. This shape is bringing you up into this area. And then I came in, once I had my stencils on and they were dry, I came in and just painted some dark shapes. So you can see, had I not had that in here, these are okay, but it's pretty boring. So it really, and when you get small shapes, your smallest shapes, your darkest against your light, and then texture, your eye will automatically go there. That's a human thing that is almost non-debatable. So those are tools, those are objective tools that you can use to create more interesting paintings. Okay. Let's talk about, I mainly used texture in what I went through. to create center of interest. Now let's talk about, well, shape is always, because everything is a shape. But let's talk about some other things. And the first one is value. And let me show you this. I might have.
Yeah, you had that at your last class with us.
Yeah, this is just, I think it's real important. Of course, this is different contrast. And there's hue contrast, which is pure color against pure color. And this is intensity contrast, which is pure color against neutrals or opaques. They kind of fall, there are different ways you can make them. And of course, then this is value contrast. When you start using these, particularly these two, I think are really valuable tools. But if you have a pretty dull painting like that one I showed you, and you put some really bright painting color in the center of interest, it's going to show. And look here, the strongest dark against, oh, it's black against white. Your eye goes there. So that just kind of is a good way, but you can mix some beautiful colors in with this, in with your values to make them really pretty, in with your more neutral values. Okay, here is a start. Very often, this is my little, I will, if I'm at the end of painting and I have paint on my palette, I will just use it up because I don't want to waste it. This happened to be, I was out painting plein air and I had a bunch of paint on my palette and I didn't want to put my palettes away and put them in the bag and have them run all over. And I wet my paper and I just slopped this on. I did some water and it's been here for a while. So I thought, well, this, it's got some interesting shapes. There's some good oblique lines going in it. I got different size shapes. That's the big one. This is a medium and they're smaller. I probably did some scraping and scratching and took it off and put it in the thing. And that's as far as it went. But it lacks finishing. And part of what I'm going to do is show you how to develop your center of interest on a start, but also we'll talk about things that you need to evaluate as you're looking at finishing or fixing a painting too.
Kathleen?
So, yes.
Oh, I have a quick question on this one.
Sure.
You mentioned the lines. When you design a painting, are you thinking about these different lines that you've got going on?
I'll tell you what I think about when I design a painting. Real quick. And I don't know if I've done this for you guys or not. First of all, am I going to have a rectangle? Let's say I'm going to have a rectangle, whatever my piece of paper. It could be a square, or it could be a horizontal rectangle, or it could be a vertical rectangle or a horizontal rectangle. The first thing you got to do is determine the perimeters of your piece of paper or your board, whatever you're going to be working on, whatever your substrate is. Then I think about designs, your overall, I call this real estate. And as we all know, real estate's expensive. So when you're doing a painting, you want to use every bit of your real estate. So if I were to draw, let's say I was drawing a farmhouse and a barn, and there was a little shed, and there was a tree, it doesn't really matter. And I just did that. Well, look at all that real estate around them. Connect them to the edges. Add some interesting shapes. So now what I look at is I always look at my corners. Is every corner a different size and a different shape? I did that very quick. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's a whole lot more interesting than this barn and the tree sitting in the middle of the paper. I think you'd all agree with that. I connected it to the edges. I overlapped and linked little sheds and stuff over, the tree, the barn was overlapping the tree. I worry about all those things, whether I'm doing a realistic painting or a abstract. So you asked about the line. And what I usually do is, I'll just use the felt pen. If I'm doing, I really do a lot of cruciform style. I start like this. this is the way I start 99% of my abstracts. And then I worry about, that's it. That's about how much time I spend. I already knew I was going to do a cruciform. I always have it come to the edge. I kind of decide where my center of interest is going to be, and I stay away from that area so I can give myself lots of opportunity. And then I decide, am I going to save whites? That's so. And how about my shapes? I got a pretty big shape here, pretty big shape here. Look what happens when I do this. Now I have a big shape here, medium, 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 and a few smalls. So that's, I'm not sure if that answered your question. That's where the lines come from. And the other thing I love to use is a Stabilo pencil. And those of you that know me, this is a Stabilo pencil. It's on my supply list. And this is Stabilo pencil in here. I'm pretty sure. I did this a while ago. I can't really remember it. But it's fabulous. It's black. They do come in colors, but I'm not too thrilled with the colors. But look what happens when you wet it. It's just fabulous. And then you can drip if you want to hold it upright. I don't know if that's showing on the. So you can get all kinds of really wonderful effects using a pencil. I very often start with Stabilo, especially if I'm going to do one of those more neutral paintings like I showed you. I'm just mopping this up because I don't want it all sloppy wet on the bottom of my.
Kathleen, do you use any Caran d'Ache watercolor?
I do. I use Caran d'Ache. I use oil pastels, which I'll use today. I use Inktense pencils and sticks. And let's get this right. I think this is the way I want this to go. So I want to get through all my projects. So see, and I let this run. I love this is letting watercolor have its freedom. I think it is so beautiful. And I was really getting into acrylics and, you know, all the textures that you build up with the mediums. And, oh, I was really into that. And I wasn't painting in watercolor at all. And I'll give him credit. I took a Dale Layton class, who's a gorgeous landscape painter, but he also does abstract landscapes, which are to die for. And I always say he made me fall in love with watercolor again, because this is the kind of beautiful things that it does. So let's first talk about the color. Okay, these are complements, red of sorts and green of sorts. So, and you know, and so just a little bit, I'm just going to run through a little bit of design stuff to think about. I kind of like this. I did it spontaneously, but I was pretty happy with it. And it was just what I had on my palette. And if you notice, green and red are opposite each other on the wheel, so they're complements. And they will make neutrals, and you can see where they intermix. There's some neutrals, but those are quite pretty. And look at the neutral against the pure color. This almost looks like more of a maroon than a red, doesn't matter. And so these neutrals give you a wonder. Look at that, when the neutral, which usually have a little more, there's probably some opaque in this green. And they have more, well, they have a lot of chalk in them, basically, any white does. And they're heavier, so they roll, when you put them in wet, they sit differently than two transparent paints. And they have a wonder, I love the effect when you put a wet, you have a wet transparent, and then you put an opaque in it. If I have time, I'll do that really quick. But the thing that about this painting is one of our principles is dominance. And you always want to think what is dominant in your painting. And as far as color, I would say the red or the warm is certainly more dominant than the green. And so the painting has a dominance. So I kind of got a head start. That might be something you might have to correct or fix in a painting where they're juggling for first place. And so, and the shapes are pretty good. I got large, medium, and small, but I don't really have a center of interest. And because I took a tool and scraped, I've already got a little bit going on up here. And you all know, don't put it dead center, almost where that big white spot is. You want it either this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant, or this quadrant. Well, this is the natural place to do it. So how can I change this? Well, maybe I need a little bit of, and we talked about different mixed media. I've got green and red, so I pulled out some green and red this is the Inktense block, and it's real intense, and it's water soluble. And these are the Inktense pencils. So I'm going to kind of stay on that same vein. And what I do to decide if I want to color on my, and that blocks are really good for this. If I want to add a color, now this is a very earthy green. Here's a very bright green. I don't know, you know. I can always come down here and scratch a little bit with my pencil, just a little bit. I don't think I want a big chunk of color, but let's see what happens. I'm going to keep with that same movement because I can always fill it in. I like to start if I'm going to do a line. Now, line is another element, which is I always start at one edge, do my thing, come down and go off another edge. Now it's pretty subtle, but in here it kind of shows up against the dark and the green against the red. So now I've created a couple more shapes by drawing a line, because line isn't a shape, it's a line, but when you have lines that intersect each other, they make a shape, and you always have to be conscious of your shapes. And then, well, let's try just filling in maybe a little bit of this. So now I've got some smaller shapes up here. So let's see what happens when I do a, I'm trying to get you a little more up here. Now, because I did that here, those are almost the same size, and that's an, be sure you have variance or variation in size. Two little triangles, that's not too good. I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna put a little one up here. And because I did it up here, I'm gonna put just a little something down here. See, I already had some lines, so I found a little place. Now, when you look at this, you look at that, don't you? Your eye goes there. And I might want to connect these with a dark, I've got a dark, oh, let's call this magenta. Okay, you see that didn't take too much. And I'm not, you know, this is the time to go really slow. All this was very spontaneous. And if you want to, because this is water soluble with the Inktense, I can take a brush and just soften that a little bit. If I don't want it all, maybe a little softer edge. Always think about soft and hard edges. I do like some hard edges up there. I might even want a bigger one, or I could even do a little design. And get daring. There. Now, I got a bit going on up there, but I think you would all agree, there is no doubt where I want you to look. I don't like open-ended lines like this.
Somebody has some audio going on in the background.
Yeah, it sounds like TV or something.
Turn that off. Or
And I'm gonna, that's a little crosshatch. So I know when I do these Zoom workshops, my husband is zoned to the bedroom. He's got a TV in there. I said, don't come out, you'll make noise, no, whatever you do. So bless his heart. And so, okay, this part of a painting go really slow. Now, okay, so I've got some texture, I've got some line. I do want to show you a couple of really fun lines that that you can, I'm going to do a little value too in here. But this is really a fun line. I took from Joan Fullerton, and she is just amazing. She's just a kick. But you do a line like this coming out of a shape, and your eye will look there. And this is another funny one. Just really, just do a little line and do little squiggles in it and different size, and they can be open or they can be closed. And those make really interesting lines. So you don't always have to just do a line or a curved line or a weavy line. Do put some personality in your lines, okay? And notice I came off this again because I felt I wanted just one more thing leading in to this area of interest. Now, maybe I need just a little bit of, I don't have much value change in here, do I? So let's get some. So we looked at texture. I added texture. I added a color. I added a complementary color, and it was in a brighter tone than I had in the painting. So, and I've still got lots of shapes. So now this is where you kind of have to be careful. This, if you're do negative painting, this is where negative painting can really, oh, I don't like that brush. Just mixing up a good dark over here, but I want it in the red tone too, so. This is where, this is fun and you can overdo it, but you see what adding, I'm just looking at some of the little shapes that were already created with those original lines and scrapings. And
So you're just adding additional places for the eye to look, right?
exactly, and I'm adding value contrast. And I'm adding, so I used value as a place to look. Break up lines, don't just always fill in shapes. The human eye will fill in. And if you, that's kind of a big shape right there with not much in it. I mean, it's not very interesting. Take a credit card and scrape through it. See, that's to me is a lot more interesting. You can even drag some of the paint down. So I've used color, I've used texture, and I've used value to make you look right there. And because I did some up there, I want to do some down here too. And this is what's fun when you do these spontaneous starts. Sorry, garbage man's here. I don't know if you all can hear that. I've already got some little lines to, little shapes that I'm just filling in. See now, look at how they're pointing towards where I want you to look. Always take advantage of what you want to do. Now at this time, I would stop and put this painting up, put it in a working mat, which is very, very important. I'll always be nagging about that because look at all this junk I got, or you may not be able to see it all, but I got a lot of junk around here. And I'm on a white board, which is nice, but not that my mat is so perfect, but they do get, but excuse me. Take us, this is the time to go slow and look at what you've done, okay? Now, let's say you have a realistic painting and it's not quite, as you look through it and you say, oh, I'm not sure where, you know, as the viewer, is it very clear where I want him to look? And pick some shapes within that painting and do some of this in here. There's nothing to say you can't put some grid in a tree or some grid on a barn or grid on a door. There's no laws. You're the artist and you get to do that kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, when you put something unexpected like that, even in a realistic painting, it will make a huge difference and people will be surprised when they see it. They'll look at it again, and hopefully again and again, because you want people to stay in your paintings. And those are the kind of things that make your paintings interesting out from other people's work. And that's kind of all what we really want to do. So that was all I would do on this for today. I'd look at it. Do I want a little more? See, already I'm seeing, because I created some shapes. This is just begging to become dark. I'm not sure that was fabulous and made a big difference, but and notice they're all fairly small shapes. Your eye will go to small shapes. Okay, I'm not going to dink around anymore. That's where you get in trouble, is if you overdo it. So you can kind of see how this painting has a different feel than when I first started. Hopefully. Was that helpful?
Very, very much.
Okay,
Yes.
now I'm going to go on to glazing. Glazing was the other topic that Ralph chose. Maybe you guys chose them. I can't remember if he sent it out to you all or not.
We've got a consensus.
Pardon?
We got a consensus.
Oh, okay, good. So I'm hopefully covering topics that can be useful and meaningful for you. And I just did some bands of color on this paper. And they're pretty much all pure transparent. I did a light. Now this is where I get to my opaque palette. And you can see, I just kept, when I was doing those stencils, I just went in whatever was there. If I wanted it to go a little bit to the orange, I put a little orange in it. And I don't worry about the neutrals, just as long as they're interesting and have some color. And I hardly ever clean this side of the palette, because whatever I need, if it's dark, I usually mix my darks here and my lights here. I just use what's in there. And if I want to push it to the warm, I add some of these warm colors. If I want to push it to the blues or cools, I push it to the cool. But I don't worry, because I can mix to get what I want. But what I did, I wanted it to dry, so it would be dry when I showed you what happens. Both glazing basically is mixing up a thin puddle of pigment, I guess is the way to call it, a thin wash, and then going over, and you really should let it dry. That's why I did this first, so it would be bone dry today. And so if you're going to do glazing, you need to do one layer at a time. That's really important, because if you try and do it wet, they'll just mix together, okay? So that's an important thing to think about. So you can do any kind of glazing. Going and making sure I have some transparent over here. This is just a transparent yellow. There's a little bit of orange in there, but it doesn't matter. What was that? Does everybody still see everything? Okay. So I'm just going to show you what happens. This is pretty juicy. Real juicy. I've got a big brush, 2-inch brush, flat. This is just yellow, and it's probably going to make the least a bit of difference. Look at the glow you get there, where I put the yellow over the red. I have a funky red. I think it's Quinn red, and it's not a true red. And I've yet to find a red I love, but this is what I had. Look at the glow it put on the green. Look at the glow there. Now, it made a neutral, because purple and yellow are opposite each other on the wheel. So you're going to get a neutral. But boy, if you want a nice neutral, that's one way to do it. But look at that glow. And that's kind of cool down there. So let's put a warm, well, just for fun, let's do this same orange. I'm going to pump it up a little bit. Oops. Not too much paint in there. I'm mixing a very, very juicy, very, very juicy. I keep going in. Usually I don't use this much water, but for a glaze, you really want. Now, you probably always just done glazes transparent over transparent. You can do layer and layer, and it does keep adding glows. But look what happens when you do a transparent over an opaque. Let's just do it this way. trying to make one pass. Now, look at the colors you get. Once again, you get that beautiful glow. And you have, I am so sorry about the gardeners. That made a really nice glow too. Look how much richer that is than that. And that's more fabulous than that. There's a really nice neutral. And here's another neutral, the blue and the orange. But look at what happens when you did it. This was an opaque I put on yesterday. Look what happens when you do the transparent over the opaque. And now I'll show you what it looks like when you do an opaque over transparent. Can everybody still hear me okay in spite of all of this business?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Is this making sense to you?
Yes.
Just showing you all the options you have. Oops, that's a little thick.
Oh. Wow.
All I did is mix over in my white. I added a little, I had orange in my brush already. I took a little white. See, I contaminate my white. I don't care. But look at these colors. And then,
Is that Chinese,
pardon?
Chinese white.
Chinese white?
No, it's whitewash. And I use whitewash for two reasons. Number one, it's cheaper than, white watercolor would be fine. And I don't care if it's Chinese white or any, I don't worry about that. So I don't sweat the small stuff. But I use gouache for two reasons. Number one, it's less expensive than watercolor. But number two, it comes in bigger tubes. Like 37 mil. And I use it in my class. I use it a lot, and a lot of people don't have it when I teach a class in person. And some people are reluctant to even buy it because they've been taught the rules. Well, I kind of teach to break the rules. But anyway, I always keep tubes of this, and I go around and squirt one on their palette, and I said, just try it. So that way they don't have to buy it. But I can even get it bigger tubes than that if I can find it. So you can see how different variations we get. And I want to show you on the back of this, a really fun thing, which I just, you put a pure color, and then you put see what I'm doing here? I went over into my darker. So I want it more of a, let's do a little blue to it. This is periwinkle. If you only get one opaque and a white, get periwinkle. It's fabulous. So I used blue because it's a contrast orange. Look what happens when I put that next to, look how that makes that orange glow. I think I could add a little light to that. This is another thing. See how that, having those neutrals against that pure color, it just makes it pop. And even this is kind of, I pushed that a little, I added the yellow into it, I pushed it almost to an olive green, and that even works. So you can see if you were doing that kind of a thing in a center of interest, how that would glow. So let's say you had a really orange sunset. Put a little of the neutral up in the sky so that it pops out that orange, for example. I'm trying to give you some ideas how you could use it realistically. So those are just little tricks that you can use. So just know that you can do, and then I could come back in. Now this is wet, so I'm breaking a rule, but let's see how it goes. Just play with this. Go on the backs of old paintings that you don't care about. What happens when I put the transparent back over the top of that? It's totally different than that. So you see, you can just keep building and building. I barely touched that. So you see, you can just keep building and building. Okay. All right, let's glaze some paintings. This is kind of a little semi-realistic painting. It's foliage. I love nature, and I love to just, I call this my up close nature. And I love leaves and trees, and I get up close in them. and do kind of, instead of the big picture, I like to do kind of more, and this is really ho-hum. There's no value to it. There's, oops.
The shapes are the same size.
Yeah, the shapes are the same size, and yeah, see, you know, the shapes are all the same size. I got a nice oblique directional going here, and I have no center of interest, and they're almost all the same value. I've added a little bit. Okay, so how am I going to fix this? Now we're kind of moving into the fixing, but we're using glazing to do it. So I need to first decide, where do I want you to look? Well, there's nothing going on here or here particularly, or here. So this is kind of, I backed myself in a little circle, a little box here, but that's all right. So this is the quadrant I'm going to want you to look at. So I'm going to look at 2 inch or 1.5. And I'm going to pick up the color. I have some options. I really have this kind of a Quinburn orange or rust color and a turquoise. So, and also it's almost an even distribution. It maybe is a little pushing to the warm or pushing to the blue, but neither one is really dominant. So do I want to push it to a warm painting or a cool painting? Now here's goes into your things that you think about fixing. So I picked up, I've got some Quinburn on a fairly thin mixture on my palette here. And I'm going to glaze and keep it transparent for now, because it is kind of transparent. But I need to make, and this is a good thing, if you have a really busy painting, and I've got an abstract over here, I'll show you how to do it. You can quiet it down. I call it knocking back. This one isn't too busy, but it's a bit busy. So I'm going to think about my shapes here. I'm going to leave some, what do I want to say? See now, because that's transparent, you're going to see everything through there. Now what I want to do is enlarge and put some more leaf type shapes up here to make it, I'm thinking, it's hard to talk and think at the same time. I added, because I want to push you more up to this corner, and I didn't, and really all the leaves are below here. So I wanted to push some leaf shapes up there. And so, and always leave some links and lines and shapes going out of the painting. I'm going to do a little negative right in there. So all of a sudden, see, I created another little leaf shape, and I knocked back all of that. It's less important now. I've got already some shapes, so I've kind of got it made. I'm going to just keep, I broke up that line, but I'm not going to worry about it. The human eye will follow it. Now, I don't want to be too, I'm going to come down here a little bit. I'm going to see if I can just make this pop out a little bit. And again, I think I'll create another leaf shape coming off here. Let's see.
Kathleen, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes.
How do you get those white veiny lines in the background?
Here,
Yeah, all those veiny white lines, yeah.
negative painting. This painting was started with a wash like this. This is the way I start a floral, anything. I maybe have a little light drawing under it. And then I come in with my second pass, and I always leave links to the edges. Oh, there must have been a resist on this. Oh, look at that, magic. I didn't know that was on there. So see, I come in like this and do all those links to the edges. And then I might come in a third pass. This is just negative painting, which is that lady I told you about. She's the one that taught me negative painting. She was fabulous. So see, I can come in darker and have those links to the outside. That's just how those did. See, there's probably, I did a wash. This was probably the original wash, that really soft stuff in the leaves. And then, did that answer your question? I started out with a soft, very washy wash, fairly light value, and just let these colors mingle on wet. It was probably wet into wet, both sides of the paper. And and let those all smoosh together. And then even probably while it was wet, I started with the next line of negative painting. I keep working on it wet as long as I can, because the more I want, then you get soft edges. These are really hard edges, which are okay because I want you to look up here. But so you can see what I'm trying to accomplish here. Already you're looking a little more in that area. I like this little guy, so I don't want him to go away. So I'm going to just very lightly go over him. I don't want him to be knocked back too much. This is what you call knocking back. I'm going to have a nice little, this little shape going out, just to kind of carry through. I'm going to leave that little lighter area in there. Now, I've got all blue up there, so I'm going to get a little, I think that was turquoise I used in there. Need some clean water. So you can see how glazing has changed this painting already. Oops, way too bright. I need a clean palette for this. See how I'm leaving more links? I'm going to even go a little bit into that because I want you to look up here, not down here. And I'm going to let these just merge together. And yes, I'm going to have a neutral, but you know what? That's okay. This is a little darker of a glaze than I would like. So I'm going to come back in and just pick a little bit up. I don't want it so dominant down here. See, I'm just knocking back these leaves because they are not the stars of the show. My friend Chris taught me, Chris Keylock that I was talking about, she says there's only one diva in a play or a Broadway performance or a star of a movie. And she said a lot of times in your paintings, there's going to be a lot of shapes and textures and colors that all want to fight and be the diva. And so you can see now, the little bit, I'm not going to belabor this, but you can see already what a difference that this painting, how I've developed the center of interest. You look here, hopefully, right? So I'm going to get just a little neutral up here. That got a little bright up here. So, and then I would come in to really emphasize it. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, this is Ralph. So
Yes,
you
Ralph.
were talking about having these veiny type lines going out of the picture and so forth. I've heard some artists say you want to be careful not to lead the viewer's eye out of the picture. You want them to stay in the picture. So where do you stand on that?
Oh, that's a hard call. But I have this is sort of my own little thing. When if you took those things away, those leaves would just be floating in there. And I don't like things floating. It makes me nervous, and you don't want me to be nervous. And so I just do it. And, you know, I'm careful. I try not to have one going right out to the corner. This is getting close. But to me, my eye does go up there. But then I kind of follow it down here. So then I'd come in, picked up this bad brush again.
Hey, you muted the corners there, so you're not like there.
I always worry about my corners, and it's pretty dark, so that makes you go back, and you can see what was back there before, but subtly. But I kind of like that blue. Now, if I were to really agonize over this painting, I might wash over that blue and knock it back a little bit. But, you know, I let it kind of, I want to look at the whole painting, but, now I've already got some shapes in here. I'm gonna just put a few little darts.
You're adding some detail to
We're
this.
kind of seeing the back of your head.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you said something because I'm not used to. You don't want to see the back of my head. Now I'm trying to point you up into this area here. So I've changed the value. Sometimes little, like, I don't want to say dots, but little lines will lead you in. I'm going to just make this one a little bit bigger by creating one more level of negative painting behind here. Now, the problem with negative paint, I could do a whole class on negative painting. The problem with negative painting is I was very concerned about that edge right there, but I also had to carry it all the way to the edge. If I teach a negative painting class, I always say take it all the way to the edge. And notice I came over on the other side of this. There's the story of the little brown rabbit. If he, now, I want you to go that way, but I don't want you to look this way. That's really hard, this edge on this side. So I wanted to create another leaf shape down there. So I'm going to soften this. Because I don't really want too much emphasis.
Is somebody
this.
speaking out there? I couldn't quite catch what you said.
Oh, because I drew this negative shape in here because I wanted to create another leaf form right here. And notice it was a very hard edge here, and it created interest on this leaf. Well, this isn't where I want you to look. I want you to look at this guy as part of this grouping. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Sure, you have to agree with me, don't you? That's what I was trying. But notice when it was hard, I didn't know what was important, the shape of this leaf or the shape of this leaf. Well, now there's no question. This leaf is more important because it's hard edge and dark, and I softened down there.
That little dot that's down there in that green leaf on the bottom?
Yes, yes. It's distracting, isn't it?
For me, it is.
Well, we'll just get rid of him. He doesn't have to be there.
I wasn't sure if you liked it.
Oh, I was ignoring it. Better. And since I don't want to, when you negative paint, I don't want it like outlined. So I'm going to just go ahead and bring this down like it's just a natural flow of things. Okay, that's a little better. I think
Is that a watercolor pun, a natural flow of things?
Oh yeah, I have my own language. This one is a soft, I want a soft edge here too. And moosh, all my class knows about mooshing. So, so you can see now this, you know, what did I spend? 10 minutes on this? I don't want to belabor it because I got more stuff. But you can see how I've changed the painting already. I need a blue wash down here. I need to knock this back. It's still busy down there. Wouldn't you agree? Let's see. Just play with this. If you have a painting that you're not invested in, and there's rarely, I probably say in my life, I have 2 paintings that are not for sale, and they have emotional value to me for one reason or another. And the rest of them, they're just time I spent behind the brush. So I'm going to see if I can knock this back a little more.
This is Rebecca. Just wondering,
Yes, Rebecca.
do you use complementary colors a lot?
I am. And notice I'm sticking with only 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Because now we're talking, oh, good, you brought that fabulous lead in. One of the principles of design is harmony. And when you try and use every color under the sun, and I will usually try and keep with analogous colors. When I start a painting, like if it's going to be a warm painting, you go this whole range. If it's going to be a cooler painting, I go this whole range. Now I can always add a complement later, like I did. I think I did that with one of the other paintings to show you the green against that kind of warm red. But I really try and keep them harmonious because it's easier to do in the beginning by using less color. You can always add more color. Like for example, okay, see that helped a little bit because I'm even knocking the back. Now it's obvious. And I would probably get in some really darks in here, go yet one other layer because you don't want them all in the middle. You want it to, oh, I was going to tell you the rabbit. It's wet. You know, if the little gray rabbit runs behind a tree, he's he's gray when he goes behind the tree, and when he comes out the other end, he's going to be gray too. So, see, I'll come in with yet another layer of darkness down there. So I just keep going. This is just negative painting. So, see now, because I want, especially in nature stuff, I want layer, 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 layer. And I can keep expanding my center of interest because when I put that dark, even that looks light, sort of. And that looks almost white. So you can see how you can use glazing, but this whole area, you know, and I'll probably do a little splatter or something down there. The other thing, if I really want to pop something out, now I'm not sure if this is what this painting needs, but I'll do it just because I don't, you know, we'll see. I'm getting a mixture here on my palette. I'm going to go back to some orange because it is a relative of the burnt orange, so it's not going to fight with it too much. And let's just glaze over and really pop some of this with. Oh, I didn't really want to cover up that light. Okay, I'm going to soften that edge because I don't really want brush strokes. I'm not sure I like it. I think I liked it light better. But see, you can always add some bright color if you need to really brighten it up.
I like the dark.
Did you like the orange? Now, there, that's better. Soft. And maybe just a little bit down here. So you can see that painting has changed quite a bit from when I first put it on the table. I just want to show you how glazing can make things less important. And that's what the painting is all about, is adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting. So this painting line, we've dealt with color. Now, I wanted to show you, here's my little box here. If, like, I just put that orange on there because, but if you have a painting that's very near and dear to you and you want to know, get construction paper. And I also pick up the little paint samples at the paint store, which I don't go to the paint store anymore, but I'm talking Home Depot, not
Ace.
the art store. And I pick up all of these samples. And so if I said, you know, if I was really being careful and I thought, oh, I want to add a color, I lay it down. Well, does that color help it? Do I want to add a blue, some blue someplace? And you kind of can get a feel. And when you're just at the end of a painting and you think you might want to do that one last thing, these are really handy. And they're really handy. I use them all the time in critiques when I'm critiquing other people's work. And I'll say, oh, I might need a little something down there. And then I'll say, well, just put a little, maybe a little yellow spot down here someplace, just to, which it does need something going on down there. So, because that's really boring now. But I did want to show you how this is all about the center of interest thing. And I did want to show you how to pump up the center of interest. I saw that. Didn't mean for that to be that dark, but I saw that space and I couldn't stand it. it was the wrong shape in there and it was jumping out at me. But anyway, so you can see how glazing can really change a painting. And then you can always come in and do more negative, but all of that is not so important as this. And we've developed a center of interest. And you do a little bit of this.
Could I ask on, this is John, on
Yes, Don.
your glazing of your greens in the bottom, you mix those greens, yellow?
Yeah, I just took turquoise. Here's my palette. I just mixed up my cobalt teal and mixed a pretty pure bit of it there. It was pretty juicy.
Yeah.
And I just, see, I got carried away there. So
Because
I'll
it was
just,
the complement of the,
yeah. And there was already blue and it was teal. I mean, it was definitely a turquoise. So, but
Right.
see now a little splatter, how that really makes a difference too.
now your
If you don't
white,
like it, just,
and
yes.
your whites in there is the paper itself, is that correct?
only here. I'd say a little white left there, a little white left there. Those are very pale. The underpainting, hardly any. That's a very light underpainting right there.
Okay.
There's another place that needs to,
So it's just paper. It's not white paint.
no, I haven't added any white paint to this.
Right.
This would be considered a transparent watercolor. I see there's a line there, a hard line. I want to soften that. I'm just getting a stiff brush and softening that. I made a brush stroke across there and I didn't like that soft. So you can see with just a little bit of work and leaving, you know, I've used value. I've used the technique of glazing. I've added a little bit of texture and
Was your reference to the picture plein air or you just made it up?
probably a photograph of a leaf, one leaf.
Okay.
That's another thing. I could teach a whole class on using photographs. I feel when I watch students, I feel one of the biggest mistakes they do is spending too much time following their photograph. Photographs are only a place to get you started or give you a sense of a place or to give you the exact outline of a shape. For example, okay, did this all make sense? How you can use glazing to kind of fix a painting, finish a painting, create a center of interest.
Yeah.
These things all begin to kind of flow together after a while. And then when you get to that stage, notice how I slowed down. And I wanted to, you know, it became a little more precious to me. And so I wanted to be careful that I didn't mess it up at that point. Okay, what I wanted to show you, it was an excellent thing you asked about photographs. Let's say you have a photograph of this huge landscape and, well, zero in on it. You can't paint everything. You know, if you went plein air every day, you still couldn't paint everything. So what attracted you? Was it the trees? Was it the mountain? What was it? And so you think, okay, that's the reason for the painting or the story I'm going to tell or what's dominant. Is it tree shapes or mountain shapes or barn shapes? You got to make a decision. But very often our photographs have everything in them. And if you paint it just like that, you're going to have everything in your painting. So I encourage people to use L's. And I don't have any photographs. That wasn't part of my deal today. But I go around in my L and say, well, what attracted me? Was it the beautiful fir trees? Or the grove of trees or grove of aspens? Or maybe it was a fabulous barn. Well, make the barn the star of the show. The trees and the mountains behind it are incidental. They're just shapes. But when I use photographs a lot is, and this is something that I think is really important. There's only 3 shapes in the world. Rectangle, square, triangle, and round. Everything else is a variation of those shapes. And you only have to worry about the outside of something. Like you ask about the leaves. Well, I can't remember, I don't even know where the photo is or what kind of leaves they were. It doesn't even matter to me. But you know instantly what this is. And you know instantly what this is. I don't even need to finish it. You know, that's a fir tree and that's a palm tree. So you don't need to worry about every leaf on the palm frond and every branch on the fir tree. Get the outside shape and get that filled in with an underpainting. And I love to do landscapes with an underpainting over the whole thing. If I want a warm glow or a cool glow, leave my whites where I think I might want them if I want to leave whites. But what I use photographs for, if it's like flowers particularly, I don't get too worried about what kind of flowers they are. But if I want to get like the middle, the little stamens and stuff, I don't have that stuff in my head. I go back and let's say I have a, flower. Looks more like a leaf. But, or let's say I have veins. How do the veins go on that? That's where I would go back and look at my photograph, for example. So, or if I needed to know what kind of little stamens were whatever in the middle of the flower. So, because those are the things I don't keep in my head, but if I want to get to that detail, I might want to learn that. But when you're looking at things, think of them as shapes and only look at the outside and your paintings. And then the important part, instead of doing a tree here and a tree here, even if that's the way they really are in the photograph, when people say that, but that's the way it was in the photograph, then I always say, but you're the artist. You're not creating a reproduction of what's there. That's what cameras do a fabulous job of. You're creating a painting. And look at the difference of these trees standing here versus if I did this. This is I'm off the topic a lot, but this, I feel strongly about this. And I'm gonna put a little guy over here and come up here, some captured negatives. There's and then not only I'm gonna, remember I talked about linking and joining? Okay, maybe there's gonna be a shadow down here. Now look how much more interesting that shape is than that shape standing by its own. Here's to kind of indicate there might be some trunks in there. So it's really important to think of a group. And if the trees, if they're a gorgeous tree and you want to do a big passage of it, you link them together like that, even though they may not really be that way. Okay, that was my off on a tangent. All righty. We still have more to do here. Okay, so we've talked about, I think we've pretty much done glazing. Does anybody have any, well, wait a minute. I have one more I can do. How's my time? I've got what? Want me to go to 11:30 painting?
Yeah.
I have 2 more demos.
20 minutes, maybe?
Pardon?
20 minutes?
Okay, I'll hurry. This is a painting that is an abstract, obviously. Here you can see I use my little toilet paper, but I just want to show you how glazing, it's pretty much the same all over. It doesn't have bad bones, but it's too much the same. You don't know where to look and you need, but I just want to show you the value of either a transparent or an opaque glaze. And this is, again, what I call knocking back. You can see just, that's a very light, but you can see this is less important now than the rest of that. So that was an opaque. You can see it was very juicy. That's how juicy it was. It wasn't very strong. And if I feel I wanted more, I could do another one. I usually start kind of light, but
when you say knocking back, you mean making it darker and go to the background?
I mean making it less important and becoming one shape. I'm going to put a fairly dark shape in here now and make it into one shape because there's a lot of, let's say this is busy for me down here. So I'm going to make a pretty dark red and I'm going to make, so that's a subtle. When I did the opaque, I created some neutrals in there, which are always going to go back, but you can still see the shapes behind it. But now down here, it's really busy. So I'm going to just make it. So I made a shape. I like that. You can still see what's going on behind here, but see how that now just became one big shape. Now, look how the yellow and these links to the edge really show up, where before you hardly noticed them because it was so, that's not what you want to do, is put a dirty thing on there. Oh, that doesn't hurt. But you can see how you can really knock back, even this kind of busy here. Watch your corners. Now you're starting to go more up here where I'll develop my center of interest. So that's a perfect example of that. And especially whether it's an abstract or any other kind of painting, watch your corners. I feel there are corners and edges. Everybody wants to get in and do what's in the middle. And then what have you done on the outside? Well, these are the, what do I want to call them? We've got a diva. The diva is going to be here. But these are all the supporting cast. And their job is to push your eye towards that center of interest, okay? See what a difference that just glazing that one shape made, okay? All right, I have one more little grouping of things because I have fixing paintings. And I've got a couple of little things to show you. Here's one of my plein air paintings. I did this as a demo at a camp I go to in the summer, which is not held this year. And boy, when I got done, and I was in a hurry, you know, I just kind of whipped it out. And there's a lot of issues with this painting. So in fixing a painting, once again, go back to your principles of design and your elements of design. Is there balance? Well, no, because all my bright yellow is here, one place in the painting, a titch here, but not enough to make a difference. Is there harmony? There's so much harmony that there's no interest. I mean, it's all the same. The shapes, I've got, you know, I got a big shape here and I got some mid shapes here. The shapes aren't too bad. Is there repetition? Oh, a little bit in the rocks. And trees are a perfect place to have repetition, and nothing shows up here. So is there dominance? Well, dominantly gray, which is, you know, pretty unhappy. And unity. Well, this part is unified. If I covered up this, that's unified. But when you have this big splash and a really sharp-edged, hard-edged plant there, there's no unity. I need that repeated someplace else here. So, and repetition. See, I need this repeated over here. I need some value change. So now I go to my elements. Value is the one thing that jumped out at me. If you squint at this painting, except for here, everything is almost a light to mid value. There's hardly any darks and there's hardly any lights. So that's the first thing I'm going to work on. And this is what I call fixing a painting. So I went through my principles and elements of design. I got a lot of texture in here. I don't need any more texture. I have a bit of line but I need some more shapes. I need to distribute my color and make it more harmonious. And I need to get some value. So I'm going to work on the value first. One of my little tricks that I love to do, see, more tricks. This is just old manila file folders. And I cut these out, and I cut out a tree shape because this is sort of begging me for some light up here. And I cut out a tree shape, and I'm going to put this in the darkest dark, and I'm going to lift. And the way I do this, and these work just great. I've got a nice sea sponge, and I put it in water, got it thoroughly wet, and then I squeezed about 95% of the water out of it. Okay. Now I need to figure out where the top of my rock is. It's right there because I don't necessarily want the tree coming down the rock. I just cut this out. And you just come away from the edges of the paint. This is pretty narrow, but cut away from the edges if it's a big shape. This is great for florals. You can come in and cut out the shape of a leaf or a petal of the flower. And see, look, now we've got a tree. The other way you can do this is, here's the part I cut out. You can see I cut it out. Well, I kept that. So now I'm going to have a darker, I'm going to have a lighter passage up here. Rinse your sponge in between each lift. See, remember I said painting is as much taking away as it is adding. So don't ever be afraid to go in and take things away. So I'm going to just lift This painting is really dry. It was done last summer. I had to go through and find. So I'm lifting, oops, that little, it's kind of delicate, those little things I cut out. Whoops. Whatever paint I use, it wants to stay in there. So now I have a kind of a ghost of a positive tree. Plus I've lightened up that area a little bit. And I can just go in with my sponge and lighten up a little bit. Because I think I want a little more light coming through there. The other thing you can do is you've got two edges. And so this, you can make a fat tree, skinny tree, anything you want. So if you want a little bit more interest up there in the forest,
Who says you can't fix watercolor?
look at it. I mean, and this is Arches 140, and it is so, you can fix it. I paint over stuff. I do all kinds of stuff. I think I'll put a little narrow tree. There's two, so let's have a grouping. See, now I can make a skinny tree. Because remember, we want repetition, but we want with variation. And Arches really, look at that. Now, even already, it's a little more interesting up there, isn't it? Okay, so you can see you can lift, you can do negative and positive lifting. Okay, now I said I needed to move this color over here someplace and get a little bit of some of this nice gold. And because I wanted, sometimes the littlest piece of paper, now, if I was treasuring this painting, where's that wonderful gold I had in it? This isn't the same gold, but look what happens when I put another little piece over there. All of a sudden now your eye goes around the whole painting. That's orange, but just pretend that it's gold because I don't, oh here, right in front of me. Look what happens when you put the smallest shape of that gold. That's not exactly, but it's close enough. Now doesn't your eye travel? And all of a sudden you notice that, don't you? It's amazing what that can do. Will you say, oh, but you've already put, it's already got gray and all kinds of stuff on it. Well, there's two ways to approach this. I can, trying to figure out what color that was. Oh, it's probably Quin Gold, maybe. When you do a painting a long time ago, you have no idea what color you used. So, first I want it soft because it is foliage. And so I'm going to just wet the painting. I can do that with a brush or I can spray it. I think over there would be a good place. And I'm not worried the shape. I just want to get some color over there. But I'm going to kind of think about it maybe being I'm going to intensify it up there a little bit. Do a little wash, little glaze up here. And it's going to point to here. Now it's more orange than this. I don't know what color that was. Add a little yellow ochre in there. And I could even do like a little tree coming up, just to get some of that color elsewhere in the painting. And I don't even care if it looks like a plant. I just want it over there. Because I introduced kind of a new color over there. I'm going to add a little bit here too. Okay, just because this could be a little more. Now, darks. There are no darks in here. The way I mix my darks is I love phthalo blue, phthalo green, and alizarin crimson. This is my phthalo. I'm just mixing it here with everything else. Here's my phthalo green. A lot of blue on that brush, okay. So you can push it to the green, and then I go up into my alizarin crimson and you can push it to the red. And I want to show you, if you have darks and you want to have darks around, okay, I'm going to go into my green, do some green here. That's almost black. Now I'm going to go to my blue push it to the blue over here. Then I'm going to go to my alizarin crimson and push it to the red over here. And then look what happens. And it almost appears black, I would think, from, so you may, but look what happens when you go in there and pick up some of the paint. You start seeing some of the warms and cools coming out. And you add some little value changes. If you're doing like a drama, like a floral, and you want a dark background behind it, go in there and look at the difference it makes, going in and picking up a few of those little, so I get in a few little lights, but now you can see the green, the blue, and a little bit of the warm. And it adds a lot of life. And I've been show chair, probably a total of 7-8 years at Coachella Valley. So when you do that, you get to walk around with the judges, and you would be surprised how often they talk about the blacks. Oh, those are such dull blacks. Those blacks are so dead. They're not alive. But you have to say, yes, it's very dark. And I left some of that pure, dark, but I also livened it up. So you can see you can make some beautiful darks that way. So, and darks, I have a saying, I want darks and lights marching through my painting. So I'm going to get, and I'm actually going to go, I'm going to add a little olive green in it because I don't want it, and maybe a little burnt sienna because I just don't want it so bright. But I'm going to come in right away. And now here I might get a picture of rocks out and say, okay, what does it look like underneath rocks? This plant is kind of what the painting's about. It's a nice little white passage through there. I don't want to. Might even make a couple of little dark rocks out here. Now, a favorite little brush. This, I took a class from Sterling Edwards, and he sells these, and they're lovely. They come in 3 sizes. They're just stiff bristles. I can't remember, 25 bucks for the set of 3. These are the $1.49 brushes you get at the paint store. And here's what they look like before that you cut off they're about this long, but you cut them almost in half, and you get a nice stiff brush. So look at those edges. I want them softened. So I get my wet, and then I put it in tissue or paper towel, and you can come in and soften edges really nicely with these brushes. And then when they get some paint on them, go back in the water, get most of the water off. I don't care if I add a little blue into here because I've got some. Now I want this soft coming up into the rock. What I'm trying to do is just get some darks in here. But I got on a topic with the brushes. But they wonder, see, and I ended up with a little negative painting there. That's kind of a flat rock. Now let's see, I need a little bit over here. This is a good place up in here, up in this plant. I'm just dipping back in my same. I added a little bit of something hooked onto that. But you can see this painting has changed already. And I'm going to just soften this edge down here because this is nature, and maybe just a little of the same dark over in this area.
Guys are driving me nuts.
I'm driving you nuts. I'm sorry.
No, no,
I know. Is that Glory?
it's Glory. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Glory. Notice I pulled that all the way to the edge, and notice that little line I left there is shooting you right back over where I want you to look.
Now, what about the corners?
these guys. Well, let's do something about those. So you can see already there's a lot more happening here, isn't there? Okay. I'm going to soften this edge. I don't like this little, because that was wet up there, kind of there. I forgot that was wet up there. Okay. Well, let's glaze a little because it's pretty boring up there, isn't it? And a nice glaze of a little nice, oh, maybe a nice little green of some. Wonder how, oh, I've got to get some highlights. I love those whites, but I lost them up here. So here, don't ever be afraid to use white paint. But I'm going to deal with the corners first since you asked about it. And I'm just mixing up kind of a neutral green. I only green I carry is olive green and a phthalo green. So let's just add a little more. See, I can just kind of negatively do some trees. Better be careful. Oh, I don't like that green. It's too, I'm going to put a little, I better do some over here. Ooh, I went into I like that better. It's a little more live. It's too green for me, but that's all right. And then your handy credit card. A little wet still for this. See, I'm not worried about every leaf on the tree. I'm only suggesting there's a forest back there because that's not what the painting's about. And I might even suggest a little dark up in here in these guys. Just to give a little tiny brush. I should have taken a picture of this painting before. Now this is going to highlight these rocks a lot more. And what's happening here, those two trees, which are pretty boring, are pointing right down to where I want you to look though. I mean, the trees themselves are pretty boring, but they're definitely, I'm adding just a little yellow ochre to that because that's where you got to be careful doing too much dinking around. Okay, I don't like that either. So you just take it away. Now, the last thing, two things. I would probably reanalyze and even add some more darks, maybe a little dark coming. Remember I talked about edges? Some darks coming in from the edges to kind of push you into the painting. And then maybe a nice little soft edge down here. Too many hard edges and your eyes go there. But that sort of leads you in a little bit. And then let's get some white on here because it's still lacking luster. Get a clean brush. Now this is white paint. A little bit over here. And once again, soften edges. Where's my little scrubby brush? That's the one I want. I love these little scrubby brushes. They just make the nicest little soft edges. See the life that gave to that painting? They're a little bit, I'd have to work them in a little more, but There's also coffee in this painting.
Yeah,
There.
there's a lot more pop to it now.
Yeah, a lot more. And then you take a nice rigger. Where's my rigger? And yeah, it's a lot more life. And that green ran in there. So I don't do everything negative, everything's some positive. And these trees look too like, oh, she lifted. So you go in and just add a little bit of something. Now the trees aren't really this color, but all I'm doing is making an interesting painting. That's what my job is. And since I had a white there, I better have a white here. And then a little white sparkle. That's not going to be good on this. Even up in the sky, because there's always little peak, there. Now, is that a little different painting than when I put, let me get a map. So you can see there's a lot can be done. I wish we had more time because I have some others that
We'll just have to invite you back.
I guess so. I put
Please.
Yes. See those shapes going off? Those are leading in to me. There's one leading in there. These trees are leading in. Okay, questions?
Go for it, class.
Are you still here? Are you out there? Can you hear me now?
Well, I love how you made those changes. It's amazing.
Oh,
Well, I did a class in the place where I live over in the desert, and I said, okay, I'm going to demonstrate there, and you've got all these things on your handouts. They're just in written word, but they'll remind you of what I did. And they said, and I had a couple ready to go, and I'll be honest, I looked at this painting and I thought, okay, what do I need to do to it? And so I did my little demo for 40 minutes or half hour, whatever it was. It was a 3-hour class. They said, we don't want you to stop. They started bringing me all of their paintings, and I'd never seen them before. That was a challenge, but you know what? It was really, it was good for me because I had to really think, and then I wanted to describe what elements was I doing. The dark, it needed the darks, it needed the lights. I always say your dark should be marching through, your light should be leading you through, and still maintain the feel of the place that was, the place of the forest. So I hope this has helped you guys and give you, if any of you have any questions anytime, or you have a painting you're stuck with, you guys have all have my email. Just shoot me off an email. I'm happy to talk with you or look at your paintings. And so.
Don has a question.
Yes.
I have one. Please forward your palettes for the transparent and the neutral and the
yes.
complementary colors.
Yes.
Would you be kind enough to do that?
I'm writing that down right now.
Thank you.
Good piece of paper. Okay. Here. The palette, there'll be the supply list. That has everything, has the paint colors, everything. And I'll have them, you know what I've also got is, well, and I don't put on them which are opaque, but you'll know. I mean, you'll know by just looking. Okay, you want the supply list, and what else was I going to send you?
The complementary colors.
Okay.
And the transparent and the opaque.
Wow.
Just everything.
Yeah, you want to know everything. And I
know
highly encourage you to play. Not so much like I did here, this one. Oh, this is the kind of stuff, this is from a class. When I see people doing things or they're having trouble with color, I say, okay, we're gonna have a mini demo and I'll just do something like this. Play, get the back of a painting and just play with colors. And I don't really have anything written up on that. So now I'll have to do that, but I'll get out. I do have a list of which are transparent and which are opaque, which I'll update that. But so is there anything else I need to send you?
Oh, thank you.
Curious what the actual palette is. I'm thinking about buying a new palette and I can't know what to buy.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, these are Cheap Joe's. I think he calls them, his basic palette. They're not very big, but look at, they've got big enough wells. I can get a 2-inch, I can get a 2-inch brush in. That's a 2-inch wash brush. I can get it in there. And they have enough to make me happy, but when I added all these opaques, I had to get another one. But what I really like about them, they're pretty compact, and I can get them on my plein air, the little board that sits on my easel, and they fit on there. You know, they hang over a little bit, but they don't fall over at all. So they're compact. You can get bigger ones, but I just don't want to carry them. And then if you have a big canvas
take
bag,
a plein air trip. That's what
this is what I use plein air when I have my whole setup. If I'm traveling, I have a smaller setup. But when I'm normal plein air, this is what I do. And then I have all my regular colors that I'm used to using, and I know where they all are. And so they're really, it really makes a difference. So I have used these, and they used to be like $8. Now I think they're $11 or $12. So, and they're not real strong. They break. I mean, but I've had them for years. I have another set over here. And
do they have a cover that you can put on them?
Yes, they do. And I want to show you what I do. Especially in the desert, I always put a sponge in. Not always, but I will spray these. I notice how juicy my paints were. I could get thick paint to get in there thick. And then I use, this is press and seal. And so when I put them to bed, I just I always spray them, especially in the desert. Especially the opaques, they dry out really hot. Even if they're wet, I give them a spray. Sometimes I spray that. And lately, I've been putting a sponge in. I don't always, but. And then I put the press and seal, which kind of has a little sticky on one side. You guys can see this, I think. Yeah. And then they have a nice cover. And they stay pretty good. And then the first thing I do when I'm going to paint in the morning, I take off the cover and I spray everything again, spray them again, because I want thick, juicy, rich paint. And, oh, look, that kind of was wet, and it kind of got, I like that. It kind of muddled a little bit up there. Mooshed. And mooshed, yeah. And let's see, what else about the palette? That's really it.
Well, thank you.
If they get really dry, like if you haven't painted for ages, which sometimes happens to me, and I know I'm going to paint the night before I go out, I take like a little picture even, or I open the top off my spray bottle and I just pour water right into each well to fill it, not a ton, I don't spill it over, till it goes almost the top, put the lid back on, and by the next morning they will be juicy all the way down through them. You have to do it the night before. You can't do it 5 minutes before you paint, but so.
Okay, so thank you very much, Kathleen. This has been wonderful.
I hope I covered everything you guys want. I'm sorry it was so disjointed, but I felt this was the best way to do it.
It was fabulous, fabulous.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye.
Just wanted to say that next time we'll get together.
And you guys have been great. So
the next time we get together is on the 28th of July. We have a non-demo Zoom, and I will send you out an invitation to that. And I will work on the video that we've got of Kathleen.
Wow.
I'll post that up to YouTube sometime in the next couple of weeks. So hope that will do it.
Okay,
Thanks, Ralph. Thank you, Ralph.
thank you, Ralph. You've been
Very
great
welcome.
to work with.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.